Welcome to the Adventure Mechanics. I'm Chandler. On this side quest, I'm going to continue to examine games with no reviews, and today's game is Vagrant Knight. Vagrant Knight is a single-player top-down arena battler created by Gamester and released on March 28, 2023. According to SteamDB, this appears to be their third and last game the developer released on Steam so far, but strangely the developer doesn't seem to be linking their games together. Their first game, Torden, is currently not available for sale at time of writing. I suspect that they attempted to differentiate the games from the developer in an attempt to make their library less obvious. Considering their previous game, Hell Pit, is at about 40% for their rating at time of writing, that makes sense, albeit not a good look when you find out about it as a player, if I'm being honest. I suspect that Gamester is not going to be releasing any more games going forward. They stopped updating their socials and all media presence shortly after the release of Vagrant Knight. Not a great way to start a review, but hey, that's what I found when I looked into the developer. Let's talk about the game itself though. How does Vagrant Knight play? In each turn in the arena, glibly called the torture rooms in game parlance, the player needs to wildly swing their sword and avoid enemies that spawn while the timer at the top of the screen counts down. When that timer stops, the enemies will stop spawning. It's then time to clean up the enemies you didn't kill in the arena. Once you've done that, you're shown 3 upgrade options to choose from, either a buff of some sort, a melee special attack, or a spell. After choosing the upgrade, you're sent back to the torture room until you complete a certain number of rounds in it, with new enemies added to the mix. Not just reskins of past behavior, either. You have enemies that will slowly chase you, others will jump at you at a regular interval, some will shoot in from off-screen at your position. As you get deeper into the game, more are introduced too. After the rounds in the torture room are won, you move on to the next randomized torture room. Play continues until you are bested. Why did I want to talk about this game? Well, I thought it had a pretty decent store page and trailer. And there's a lot to say about your game having a cohesive art style and a good trailer on Steam. The game header capsule image is well executed, showing the player's avatar in an action pose, sword at the ready, surrounded by enemies you'll face seemingly coming out of the shadows. It's not anything fancy or complicated, but it clearly shows the player what to expect in this action game, even if they don't know what that action will be. It caught my eye because it showed me rather than told me in the capsule art. It also knows the genre conventions and leans into them, even if it's rudimentary. In the GDC talk, Empathizing with Steam, How People Shop for Your Game, Chris Zukowski explains that she should be doing exactly that, much as the romance novel did to signpost their readers the flavors in the particular novel. On a completely unrelated note, I highly recommend looking at romance novels and trying to guess the major plot points just by looking at the cover. My partner and I call it judging a book by its cover. As a tongue-in-cheek nod to the old adage, don't judge a book by its cover. And much like that silly activity, your game should signpost what the player is in for in the capsule art, and Vagrant Knight does that well. It's not just the art that works well either. The trailer starts with the action, showing all the interesting stuff and monsters you'll face in 44 seconds. No slow fade in and out of the developer logo, no build up to the action by showing the arenas. Just starting off with the action and quickly showing the upgrades you can get in any given run. Short and to the point. I like that. It follows the Derek Liu idea of showing 2 or 3 things that are interesting and focusing entirely on that. In the case of Vagrant Knight, it's the action on the screen, variety of enemies and torture rooms, and the upgrades. It makes you want to try the game with every second that the trailer runs. Simple and well executed. Now, does the game have more than those 3 things in it? Not really. That's not to distract from the game per se, but it really made the trailer work so much better only having those 3 things to look at and nothing more. I fully expect that Gamester, the developer, would have absolutely tried putting everything in it if there were more features in the game. But they didn't have this issue in this particular instance. Even though there's not much to this game, everything in their trailer and their Steam page are focused on showing you the best parts of Vagrant Knight. Gamester definitely knows how to make an appealing Steam page, if nothing else. That's great and all, but why is Vagrant Knight on the same games with no review pile? It's a game feel. What the trailer and Steam page don't show you is how this game feels to play. The player moves stiffly around the screen. The quote-unquote combat feels exactly as I described it earlier. You're swinging your sword wildly with seemingly little feedback when you hit an enemy with your wildly gesticulating sword. And yes, I do mean that the sword is made for talking, not fighting. It stays in place when you click around the combat radius of the player, doing a left to right swinging animation. And it stays there until the animation is done. And that animation lasts entirely too long. It makes the game feel stilted and clunky somehow. And that's just not a great feeling. I fully expected the sword to dance around the player, doing damage when it came into contact with enemies with any momentum. And maybe that's me wanting to make this game something it's not, but I feel like if Vagrant Knight had that, it would be getting a lot more eyeballs and recommends from people who played it. Lean into a bit of wuxia or some other sword art, and make it feel like the player's dancing around the enemies in the arena, slashing them with a quick flick of the wrist. Even if you don't end up killing them in a single blow, it would feel like you were doing more than just wearing out your mouse, mindlessly clicking on enemies endlessly. The magic system is somewhat basic as well. While you get the opportunity to select magic when you win, you aren't guaranteed to get a spell. That's not bad, but when you aren't guaranteed to get one, starting with a basic one would be nice. I initially didn't even know how to equip a spell. After selecting a boon, the player is still shown a pair of lists. On your first pass, most if not all of that list will be shown as locked. In order to select a spell or a special attack, you need to actively click on that spell or special attack as you want. It's not a big deal, but it's not obvious when you first look at that skill screen. When you use the skills in game, that's lackluster too. Almost no effects, weak sound effects, the works. The spells are locked in place, which looks odd when you're using something like Inferno, which is a short-range spell that should stay centered on the player for a greater effect. That's just the lack of juice. I would say that that's expected for a game in early access, but it's pretty clear this game has been abandoned. Nothing is really popping out and screaming, "Hell yeah!" when I play, despite what the trailer gives. If there were fewer but more consequential spells, I think it could have made a better game. In that, I mean that the spells and special attacks that remain feel far more consequential and make the big boom that getting a new weapon in Vampire Survivors feels like. We didn't need a bunch of half-done abilities for early access, we needed a few finished ones that give the player an idea of what we could expect when others are added. Really awe the player with what you have cooking, if you know what I mean. I'm getting into the weeds designing an entirely different game here, and to be fair, I should certainly stop, but I think that I'm getting my point across. The combat at a base level just isn't entertaining, and that could have been easily exposed if the developer did a bit of sanity check and had some playtesting feedback before releasing into early access on Steam. I genuinely think that if it took base combat and made it interesting, it could have been a unique take on the Vampire Survivors genre. That sort of tower fantasy, coupled with the pomp and circumstance of Vampire Survivors, could have been something. But that's not what's sitting forgotten in Steam's early access now, sadly. The rest of the game, well, they're serviceable and mostly consistent. That's good enough. The audio could have done with another pass, since some of the sound effects are noticeably louder than the rest of the game, and there's some features in the options I would personally expect, like music and sound effect controls. I would appreciate a credits screen too, but that's mostly a personal thing. I know as a single developer, the assumption is, Gamester made it, it's just nice to have all of those extra little additions of where you got your art and all the effects and all of the credits of everything that went into it. The artwork is simple and consistent throughout, but none of it is particularly bad or good. And as strange as it sounds, that's a good thing. It's consistent. All of it's at the same level and doesn't demand more attention from the player over the other artwork. And I know that sounds like I'm bashing it for being bland, but with games in this level of 0 reviews, consistent art is not a given. Bland is frankly a massive step up from a lazy asset flip or an AI dump. And Vagrant Knight is nothing if not consistent. No crashes, no noticeable bugs, nothing hilariously out of place. It's a competent game as is. I'm curious where it was planned to go from here, but that's not going to happen at this point, so I just won't ask further on that. Does Vagrant Knight deserve to be in the no review pile? No, not at all. It's a competently done game with an unfortunately boring combat loop. Everything I've seen in it is not great, but rather executed decently. And that's saying a lot compared to its peers. I'm not saying I'll get an itch to play it again, but I am saying that this game had an audience it could have connected with if the moment-to-moment gameplay was better. And like the game itself, I would be interested to see where Gamester goes from here, But like the game, it's similarly not going to go anywhere, I suspect. I truly think that the developer was tantalizingly close to something, but I fell short of getting there. It's sad to see, especially since they beat the first hurdle on Steam of making it past one game released. It does, however, give me an idea for a small game, and that's a silver lining of some sort, I guess. I'm going to stop waxing poetically about Vagrant Night. I feel like I'll just be gilding the lily if I go any further. As always, if you have any thoughts on this side quest or anything else game related, reach out to me below this episode or on various social media. My handle is at JCSIRRON. This has been another dive into no game reviews on Steam for the adventure mechanics, side quests. I'll talk to you next time. The intro and outro music are excerpts from Plinian, retro gaming version, royalty free. Music provided and produced by Lone Peak Music. Link in the description.